Hey, this is Shane here, and I'm in Studio J, and I've just finished shooting and producing the first episode on the YouTube channel JayPeeEye.OnHumanRights. And I just want to let you know that please bear with the video. I did it in one shoot, and I did a lot of cutting, so it looks kind of choppy in some places, but I don't think it looks too bad. And I tried to put in a lot of information, but also make it fun too. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and see you next time. Hey, what's up everybody? My name's Shane, and this is the premiere video for my new channel. It's called JayPeeEye.OnHumanRights, and I am really excited that I am able to start bringing some content to YouTube because I have a lot of things that I'd like to talk about, and I know they're going to be important to all of you viewers, because the majority of Americans are impacted the same. So for my first video, I am so fired up, pissed off, upset, sad, so many mixed emotions for what's going on right now, and I just have to bring some different perspective on it, because it seems like in the milieu of coverage by legacy media, they've overlooked a lot of things that could help improve and reduce the risk for children going back to school of contracting COVID-19. So in this episode, we're going to talk about the return to in-person learning and how that's being pushed by various groups within our country and the government, but how all of these things that we're doing are reactionary policies versus preventative policies. And I'm going to talk about some of the reason for that, and a lot of it is because we're being dishonest with ourselves. And by that I mean the government and the people who are leading us. I really want to make it a point to talk about how a lot of the policies that are coming from our government have been and continue to be racist. And I'm going to talk about some of the ways that that's being revealed by the coronavirus pandemic. I hope you enjoyed this video. It is a very hard topic, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. So I'm going to bring you some information, show you some things from legacy media, and then I'm going to also show you some things from independent journalism. All right, here we go. According to an article in the Washington Post in the last few days, the Delta variant now is accounting for 98.8% of new US COVID infections, according to the CDC. And that's insane. We know that the Delta variant has protection from our current vaccinations, but that does decrease over time. And so the efficacy of the vaccine, which means how well it works, decreases the longer it's been since we had our initial vaccination, or if we were fully vaccinated. Now, one of the most alarming trends with this Delta variant is how it's impacting children. For instance, in an article from the World Socialist website, 28% of Louisiana's surge in cases are among children ages 19 and under. And that's pretty amazing, considering that children ages 12 and up are able to get the vaccine. So we're seeing overall spreading of the virus, and that is intensifying as we're pushing children back into schools. And with the reopening of schools, we've had 180,000 COVID-19 cases in the first week of school, the week of August 19th alone. I was able to pull up a map from the Centers for Disease Control, and it shows the progression of the prevalence of COVID-19 in our area in Ohio, and it is pretty amazing how the counties go from low to moderate to substantial to high, and the county where I live in, and the county where my son goes to school, which is in the high. So this is as of the beginning of this week, which is today is August 25th. This continues to be very alarming. We're seeing cases go up all around us, and yet the entire apparatus of the media and the government are screaming and hollering that we need to get kids back to in-person learning. And part of that, as a caveat, at least in all the cases that I've seen, is that they're not offering any online learning for kids. So not only are we forcing the parents to send their kids back into these classrooms, but if the kids get sick and have to be quarantined, they're not able to get an online learning situation at home. So this is contributing to kids, particularly who have long COVID, falling behind in education. And just in the last week alone, up until Monday this week, there were 25 deaths in children just in the last less than a week alone leading up until Monday. How can people let their kids go back into these schools? We can't really blame the independent journalists. We can't blame the usual criminals like our ex-president Donald Trump, because they're gone and they've been censored. All the censorship impacts are resulting in consolidation into the legacy media channels on your internet, on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. They're being consolidated to push the legacy media's narrative. As much as you'd like to blame, the kooks and conspiracy theorists and the Trump effect, you can't do that right now. So who are we going to put the blame on? I don't think that matters, because regardless of how you look at it, more children are getting COVID-19, more children are being sick from it, and the Delta variant is just wreaking havoc on our healthcare system, increasing the amount of ICU beds to the maximum in a lot of places already, and we're just coming out of summer right now. schools are just going back. So without people being able to get consistent, accurate information, people no longer trust in the government, in higher institutions, or in legacy media, because not only have they been fed misinformation with some intermittent truths in there, but also the biggest crime is the lack of information, the lack of coverage. So all throughout the beginning of the pandemic, there was a big push to make it more difficult to get information out about COVID. And they wanted to drive people to the, legitimate authoritative sources. But because of the distrust that's been sown into the public over the last 20, 30 years, people no longer trust in those sources. So instead, they're getting their information from other sources that may or may not be right. And historically, we've seen that the information provided by some of these other alternative sources is not always accurate. But people are taking it for granted because the alternative, they just don't trust. And that's not hard to understand. So, we have this entire country where our vaccination rate is substantially lower for being an advanced post-industrialized nation. The vaccination rate of all eligible children in the county that my son goes to school in is only approximately 16%. And I did just a little calculation myself using data from United States Census to approximate how many children there are between the ages of 12 and 18 in that county, and then dividing that by the amount of vaccinations based on the Ohio's COVID-19 dashboard. And that's very alarming. I mean, even among kids who are eligible for the vaccine, they're not getting vaccinated. And whatever the reasons are, those are people's personal reasons. And you cannot force people to change. As much as our political class and ruling class want, it is just not possible to force people to change. The only way that you can get people to change is we need to start to instill that our institutions are providing the kinds of information and actions that meet the needs of the pandemic. And unfortunately, that just has not happened, and I don't see it happening. So we're well below that, and the crime that's associated with sending kids back into these situations is that the people making these decisions are completely unrealistic. From the CDC down to the school boards and a lot of the teachers' unions, they are making these decisions because they feel like they have to keep the economy going. The economy. What about the 25 children who have already died? Preventable deaths. What about them? What about the many, many, many more? And predominantly, as with everything else in our country, the biggest impact, the biggest pain is going to be suffered by those who don't have, by the poor, by the black and brown people, by people who have been cast out of their homes already because of the pandemic, because they lost their jobs due to no fault to their own, I being one of them. And then instead of making sure that you're able to go back to your job or that you're able to keep paying your bills, they just say, oh, we're gonna give a moratorium, and maybe down the road we'll give you a little bit of money to try and soften it a bit. Well, guess what? It's pretty hard to soften with $1,400 or even $2,000 when the average person who took a forbearance on their mortgage or their rent payment is in the hole for like $6,000. So if you've been out of work, not able to pay your bills, you're borrowing money, you're taking out credit if you can, and what are you being promised? Well, guess what? When the moratorium ends, you're gonna have to pay all that back right now. So as you've been struggling to just put food on the table You've been spending time waiting in food lines. You've been borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. And now, oh, guess what? There's millions of people, over 1 million already, who the moratorium expired and didn't get extended for these people. There's 10%, the 10% of people that have been mentioned who did not get covered by the moratorium extension of last week or the week before, whenever it was. All those people are already not being able to pay their bills back and not being able to pay their mortgage back, and it's a very good chance they're gonna lose their home. I was one of the lucky ones because I have a VA-backed loan. With some coercing, I found out that they were pretty much required to underwrite my loan and rewrite the terms so that I could pay back that amount at the end of the loan instead of having to pay it back right now, which there's no way I could have afforded to do. I lost my job. I'm disabled through the military service, and I'm in the middle of a process to try and increase my disability rating because I've been unable to work because of my back and my neck. So people in these situations are not getting the break they need. So what does that mean now? Well, you're probably not going to want to fight to get your kid out of school if you know that by doing so you're not going to be able to work, or you're going to have to rearrange your work. It's like self-censorship, except in the worst kind. Like you're censoring your voice to keep your child safe because you need to pay your bills. That's capitalism at its finest, folks. You have to participate, because if you don't, you're going to be out on the street. And once you're out on the street, the chances of you getting housed again are extremely low. So the biggest thing that people are pushing for, since they're either unwilling or unable to try and push for their kids not to go back into the classrooms, particularly those who are not eligible for the vaccine. So everybody's like trying to get these mask mandates put in the schools. We've had state after state try and ban mask mandates. It's in the court system. I mean, it's ridiculous the lengths people are going to prevent requiring something that may save your child's life. Amazing. We've had some brave people who have stood up, and it seems like the number is growing for school boards, counties, school systems who are going against their primarily Republican governors and putting in place mask mandates. But masks is almost like, if you think that masks and vaccinations is going to prevent the carnage, I mean, it's insane. It just shows how much of a people are living in a dystopian world. Their primary concern has to be survival. And in our world, you cannot survive without money. So we're pushing for mask mandates, which is good. Maybe that'll help some kids, but that is probably only about a quarter of what needs to be done to make schools safe. Schools are overcrowded to begin with. Then you don't allow any online learning, even though for kids like my son, who did online learning last year, the entire year, he participated in class, and he did great. Now, I'm not saying missing out on the social building is horrible, but what's the alternative? Maybe they lose some IQ, maybe they get long COVID and don't recover for a long time. They're definitely, you get sick or you're exposed, you're quarantined, and you don't get online learning, so you're going to lose that time as well. The other thing is there's glaring evidence that our schools are just not safe because of the physical facility themselves. There's a lot of really aged buildings that don't have windows that open. Based on a report in NEA Today in August 20th of 2020, the Government Accountability Office had done a assessment of physical facilities for safeness to get back to school and to prevent the spread of coronavirus when inside schools. Well, more than 41% of school districts in our nation need to have an update or replacement of their heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. And that's in at least half the buildings in each school district across the country. That is insane. I personally can vouch for this because as of a couple years ago, my son's school system was planning on rebuilding their school building, K through 12 building. Well, there was two major reasons for that. But then the pandemic happened in 2020, and guess what? The state cut the money that goes into the budget to help rebuild schools. So now, knowing that their ventilation system is piss poor to nothing, they're not even having mask mandates for these kids, where they're going into a building with other children who may have breakthrough cases of COVID if they've already been vaccinated and may not be wearing a mask, or they just may be a member of an anti-vax, anti-mask family. So you have all these kids who may be highly contagious, no one knows it. Just this last weekend down the street, I live about a half a block from our school, they had a major game on Friday and Saturday, packed stadium. I mean, you could feel the people screaming. There was that many people there. So from the reports I've heard, the majority of the people do not wear masks at these games. So we have these massive super spreader events at schools going on, as school's starting, before school's starting in some areas. And then right after that or during that, we're packing these kids into these tight classrooms often and saying, hey, you know, we recommend you wear a mask. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe it's something that your family believes in or not, but you know, if you don't have the vaccine, well, good luck. Try and social distance 3 feet. The biggest issue that we're having here is that we're not facing the reality of the situation. Every time you read a policy or a guideline from the CDC or a health department or whatever, they're all based off of these perfect situations where kids all are able to social distance 3 feet and they all wear masks and the ventilation systems in these buildings are perfect, so you know they're exchanging enough air to keep the concentration of the virus in the parts per million of air down. But that's not the reality, and because we're not facing the reality, we're not planning for the worst. Instead, we're just saying too bad. And if you can't do anything about it, or you're not able to, your children, our children, are going to suffer the consequences of the failed policies and guidelines and practices of the people who are running our country. We're just going to be reactionary, and when the hospital beds are full, and some of them are, and there's inevitably happening and going to happen death panels where they decide who gets to care and who doesn't get the care because there's not enough ICU beds for everyone. So are the factors that go into that equitable? No. And should we have death panels? Well, I don't think so. We shouldn't have to have death panels. But because of our failure to manage this pandemic, it is managing us. And the only people that we really have to thank for it are these idiots in Washington, in higher institutions, private corporations, all these people who are deciding that we have to go back to work in order to serve their interest, to keep money coming into their pockets. And the people who it affects the most, well, too bad. You're already hurting. When you are working and your boss is like, oh man, we're gonna amend your contract and we're gonna give you a 3% raise. Man, isn't that great? And then you look at a news article on your phone on your break and you see that, oh man, inflation's up 5.4%. That means I got a negative 1.6% raise this year. Woo! We have got to make some changes in this country, and that is part of my mission for starting this channel. There's a lot of voices out there now that are focusing on evidence and using critical thinking skills to analyze what we're being told by our legacy media. And you know, by using our critical thinking skills and instilling those in our children and common sense, we can start to battle back against these false narratives that are being put out about the safety of schools. They're saying schools are safe, yet teachers and students who are being put in these situations don't feel they're safe because, oh, guess what? Your friend just got sent home for 2 weeks. Your other friend got sent home and never came back to school. But you know, you're not instilling trust in these people, so they're not going to trust you. So we have to actually talk about class issues and class struggle and all around, because the institutions that we had built up and counted on to protect us and, you know, to be the arbiters of truth have failed us. They have failed us en masse. So it's up to us to fight back. We need more journalists. We need new journalists. We need critical thinkers who are going to analyze what they see and hear and not just repeat it verbatim. And you know, that's why I'm here. I want to add to the voices out there so that we can take America back. And you know, I'm sorry you have to I don't want to be equated with you know, make America great again, or make America great, or keep America great, whatever. As much as I would like to say that our country is the greatest in the world, it's not. Sorry to burst your bubble. You know, we're not doing right by our people. We have the worst healthcare system in the world based on actual statistics. It's criminal based on actual findings of studies, yet we leave the vaccine rollout to them, and they, of course, they do a horrible job. And what do we say? Oh my gosh, we can't believe it. They didn't do a good job. Whoa, let's start a committee. No, it's time to shake things up and get things moving. So if you are interested in finding out some different types of news than is allowed to be shown in legacy media, I'm including some resources at the end of this video, and probably my favorite is Rad Indie Media, RADINDIEMEDIA.com, and they post all kinds of different articles that are more well sourced and from real journalists. So let's get out there. Let's get involved. Go to meetings. Go to the board of trustee meetings and school board meetings, and you know, we have to start to voice our opinion, because we assume that it's being voiced for us by these professionals when it's not. They're only voicing the concerns of the capitalists. All right, y'all, peace, and please like my video if you liked it. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell, and hopefully you got something out of this and you don't turn away from it thinking, wow, this guy's an idiot, because it's just, nothing has made sense. Nothing has made sense in this country for a long time, and we're just now starting to wake up to it. And you know, I hate to say this, but we do have Donald J. Trump to thank for that, because everything that he did showed the weaknesses of our system. And you know, I have to thank him for that, because a lot of people wouldn't have any idea how horrible things are, how uncontrolled things are, and how corrupt things are if it weren't for him. You know, other than that, I got no love for the man. But all right, bye.